Good morning, everyone. I just wanted to record this quick follow-up to our discussion about Ellie's disease. And I'm really pleased with how all of you have identified Toxoplasma gondii as the causative agent of what's afflicting Ellie. But I wanted to give you a little more information about this interesting disease and kind of connect it to some things that you may be aware of and may find interesting. This information is actually found in just a couple of pages within your book in chapter 23. But toxoplasmosis is the disease that emerges when infection of Toxoplasma gondii has occurred in humans. The majority of human cases don't have any symptoms, but for those individuals who Ellie would be included, we see the symptoms of fever, just feeling badly, and we can also see inflammation of some pretty major organs in the body. We do know that it is very dangerous for a pregnant woman to be infected with T. gondii because the parasite can actually cross the placenta and can infect the fetus. And because of this process, as bradyzoites and pseudocysts form, it can cause a lot of conditions up to spontaneous abortion, stillbirth, and some pretty severe birth defects. So this is why you have seen recommendations that pregnant women not deal with cat litter boxes because of the life cycle that we're going to look at in just a second. So cats are the definitive host in Toxoplasma gondii. And what that basically means is that the life cycle of the organism cannot be completed until it reaches the gut of a cat. But Toxoplasma bradyzoites or pseudocysts can infect and live in many different types of cells. So let's actually look at the life cycle briefly. So you see at the top the cat is eating a mouse, and within that mouse there are pseudocysts or bradyzoites present. Now, mice and rodents are not the only hosts possible. Birds may also be infected, as well as other creatures that cats may hunt. However, once those pseudocysts or bradyzoites, which that term is often used interchangeably, is ingested by the cat, they obviously reach the intestines of the cat, and that is where sexual reproduction of this parasite may occur. So oocysts are produced, which now become sporozoites. Um, and then we have those being shed in the feces of the cat, which is where they can be picked up by the variety of additional animals. Now, livestock may be able to pick up these cysts, um, as well as other wild mammals. The problem becomes when there is ingestion in terms of human disease of the pseudocysts or bradyzoites that maybe can be picked up in undercooked meat. And then the same kind of system happens where there is a lot of division of the cells, and those sporozoites, as they invade the tissues, can be in any of our organs, which is why sometimes in organ transplants, individuals can acquire toxoplasma. Um, Basically, that becoming a cyst process is driven by the fact that the human or the mammal's immune system is able to start fighting off the infection. But T. gondii are tricky, and so instead of just dying, they move into these pseudocyst forms until they find a more hospitable environment, which would be a new host. Now, it is true that consuming undercooked meat with the parasite would cause you to have toxoplasmosis, or to at least become infected with T. gondii, even if that's an asymptomatic infection. But we do know that zoonotic transmission from felines to humans does occur in the form of litter boxes. And in the United States, in particular, there are a large number of pet cats. Um, and I would actually say that this is as much of a problem as consuming undercooked meat, simply because the process of producing the meat that you and I eat, especially if we are getting it from the grocery store, those animals have less opportunity to be infected. They're not generally in places where there's a lot of cats. So, the CDC, I've given you that website also, does talk about it being a foodborne illness. And I would say in other countries, or if you raise your own meat or ingest a lot of wild game, you're probably at an increased risk. However, what's really interesting is the last estimates I saw put Americans being infected with T. gondii, that about 40% of individuals are already infected and are unaware of it. And that's because you might get sick, like Ellie has for a few days. You might show no symptoms at all. But after that, the parasite has now become a pseudocyst or a bradyzoite inside your cells, and it's causing what we think for many years have thought it caused um, no problems. Although the other problem is once it's inside your cells, it's very difficult to get the parasite out of your cells without damaging your cells. Obviously, there are some groups of people that treatment is very necessary for, especially early during the infection. So AIDS patients, pregnant women, and newborn children. Um, but here's something really interesting. Here at Southern Wesleyan, we have previously conducted research with Toxoplasma gondii. People have walked by this research many times and not noticed it. So several years ago, I assisted Mark Cromer, who is now Dr. Mark Cromer, and Courtney Williams, who is becoming Dr. Courtney Williams. Mark is an MD. Courtney is working on a Doctor of Nurse Anesthesia degree currently. She is already a registered nurse. But these, at the time they were students, they conducted this project where in cell culture they infected human cells with Toxoplasma gondii, and they altered the amount of dopamine in their cell culture media. And they looked at the growth of the precursors of L-DOPA, because it is known that individuals that are infected with T. gondii do have increased levels of dopamine in their brain, because the brain is one of many organs that often gets infected by T. gondii. Why this has become important, and like I said, this poster is hanging in the wall on the first floor of Gibson, so when you get back to campus, feel free to stop by and read more about that. But why this is important. Several years ago, researchers were finding that infection with T. gondii in cats was showing, these cats were showing a lot of atypical behavior. In particular, they were not afraid of cats. And normally, rodents are very averse to even the smell of a cat's presence, and they show fear and they leave areas where cats have been present. However, rodents that are infected with T. gondii don't show those behaviors at all. In fact, they seem to have no fear at all. So that led researchers to the questions of are there similar impacts on human beings that are infected with T. gondii, in the sense that cysts within their brains are causing or are leading to or are associated with changes in human behavior. So Dr. Rouse and several of her students, actually some of them did some of the work where they actually had rats and they looked at behavioral changes in infected rats. Some of them actually looked at what parts of the brain the cysts preferred. So for a long time, we had rat brains preserved within the refrigerator in the stockroom that were being sectioned using a microtome and then fixed on microscope slides so they could be inspected to see which structures of the brain did the bradyzoites tend to inhabit. But those research questions, there's lots of different ones. And so if you do a Google search for T. gondii and fatal attraction syndrome, you'll actually get many different journal articles and other articles that tell you more about it. But there have been concerns about, okay, we know that there's an increase in dopamine in the brain. There's also been some correlation showing that males who are infected with T. gondii have an increase in testosterone levels, which can lead to increases in aggression and anger. And so there have been studies looking at, does T. gondii have a higher incidence in our prison populations? Does T. gondii lead to other psychological disorders and mental disorders like schizophrenia? Or are we seeing what impacts are the presence of T. gondii cyst within the human brain having on different human behaviors? So, while the book even says there's not much we can do and we kind of ignore the presence of T. gondii once it is no longer in this active disease state of toxoplasmosis, I'd wanted to make you aware that there are a lot of really interesting research areas where we're trying to understand if the presence of T. gondii bradyzoites, or pseudocysts as they're also called, are causing different types of mental health disorders or behavioral disorders, or at least behavioral impacts that have previously not been understood. So that's all for this little sharing about T. gondii. I hope you have a great day.